On August 4th, 1892, the industrial city of Fall River, Massachusetts, was boiling under a brutal heatwave. The textile mills spewed smoke, and the air was heavy, almost undry. At number 92 2nd Street, a modest house painted drab beige, the morning silence was broken not by a scream, but by a strange, muffled laugh at the top of the stairs, and then chaos. Lizzie Borden, a 32-year-old spinster, screamed for the maid. "Maggie, come down. Father's dead." Someone came in and killed him. When the police arrived, they found a scene that defied comprehension. Abby Borden, one of the wealthiest and stingiest men in the city, was lying on the living room sofa. His face was gone. He had been struck 11 times with a heavy, sharp weapon, likely a hatchet. The blood was still fresh, dripping onto the carpet. He had been attacked while he slept. But the horror didn't stop there. Upstairs, in the guest room, police found Andrew's wife, Abby Borden. She was face down on the floor, in a pool of congealed blood. She had been killed hours before her husband, struck 19 times in the back and head. Inside the house, there were only 2 people: the maid, Bridget Maggie Sullivan, and Andrew's daughter, Lizzie. All the doors were locked from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. The killer didn't flee through a window. The killer, police soon realized, had never left the house. All the evidence pointed to Lizzie. The motive, the opportunity, the hatred, but there was one impossible detail, a paradox that would turn this case into one of the greatest legal mysteries in history. After slaughtering 2 people with 30 hatchet blows, in a frenzy of blood that should have coated the walls and the assailant, Lizzie Borden's light blue dress was immaculate. Not a single drop of blood. This is the file on the woman who became America's most famous suspect. The devout Sunday school daughter who, perhaps, committed the perfect crime. This is the Lizzie Borden dossier. To understand the massacre, you have to enter the house at number 92. It wasn't a happy home. It was a pressure cooker. Andrew Borden was worth the equivalent of millions today, but he lived like a pauper. He refused to install indoor plumbing or electricity, luxuries all his wealthy neighbors possessed. The house had no hallways. To go from one room to another, you had to pass through the bedrooms, eliminating any privacy. Lizzie and her older sister, Emma, were adults trapped in perpetual childhood, living under their father's strict financial control and the resentful gaze of their stepmother, Abby. The tension in the house was palpable. Lizzie detested Abby, calling her Mrs. Borden instead of mother. In the days leading up to the murders, a strange illness struck the family. Everyone, including the maid, suffered from violent vomiting and stomach pain. Abby Borden feared she was being poisoned. Suspicion fell on the milk, or perhaps the local bakery, but Lizzie mentioned to a friend that she felt something terrible was about to happen. On the day of the murders, Emma was out of town. Lizzie's uncle, John Morse, who was visiting, had left in the morning. Andrew went downtown to tend to his business. This left Lizzie and the maid Bridget alone in the house with Abby. Lizzie told police that Abby had received a note to visit a sick friend and had gone out. It was a lie. Abby's body was cooling upstairs the whole time. When Andrew returned home around 10:45 a.m., he was tired and unwell. He lay down on the sofa for a nap. Bridget, the maid, went up to her attic room to rest, exhausted from washing windows in the heat. This left Lizzie alone downstairs with her father. The time window was brutally short. Between Andrew's arrival and Lizzie's scream calling for Bridget, only 15 to 20 minutes passed. In that time, someone would have to enter unseen, kill Andrew brutally without making a sound, clean themselves perfectly, and vanish. Or Lizzie did it. The police investigation was a disaster from the start. Dozens of onlookers, neighbors, and reporters flooded the crime scene, trampling evidence. But even in the chaos, Lizzie's behavior stood out. She was strangely calm. She didn't cry. Her answers were confused and contradictory. In one moment she said she was in the barn looking for fishing sinkers. In the next, she said she was in the yard eating pears. Police searched the barn. The floor was covered in thick, undisturbed dust. No one had walked there. They found, in the basement, the head of a broken hatchet, covered in ashes, as if it had been washed and then intentionally dirtied to look old. The wooden handle was missing, possibly burned in the stove. But the biggest barrier to prosecution was the lack of blood. Experts at the time agreed the attack would have caused a spray of blood. The killer would be soaked. Yet, when neighbors and police arrived, Lizzie was wearing a blue Bengaling dress. It was clean. Her hair was perfectly arranged. There was no blood on her hands or face. How could she have killed her father and, within minutes, be presentable? Did she kill naked? Did she use a heavy apron and burn it? The answer might have come 3 days later. Alice Roussel, Lizzie's friend who stayed with her after the crimes, walked into the kitchen and found Lizzie tearing up a blue dress. Lizzie claimed the dress was stained with paint and she was going to burn it in the stove. Alice warned her, "I wouldn't let anyone see me do that, Lizzie." But Lizzie burned it anyway. Was that the murder dress? Or just an old dress? The police never saw it. Despite the lack of direct forensic evidence, the circumstances were damning. Lizzie was arrested. The trial, beginning in June 1893, was the sensation of the century. It was America's first celebrity trial. Newspapers from across the country sent reporters. Public opinion was divided. For many, the idea that an upper-class white, church-going woman, the daughter of a gentleman, could commit such savagery was unthinkable. Criminal science of the time, led by Cesare Lombroso, claimed born criminals had brutish, physical features. Lizzie looked like a school teacher. The defense exploited this bias masterfully. They presented Lizzie as a fragile maiden, an orphan victim. Lizzie fainted in court when her parents' skulls were presented as evidence. The O'Male jury was visibly moved. The prosecution struggled. They tried to introduce testimony from the inquest, where Lizzie's answers were contradictory, but the judge excluded it. They tried to introduce Lizzie's attempt to buy prussic acid, a deadly poison, the day before the crimes, but the judge excluded that too. What remained was a purely circumstantial case. Was there motive? Yes. Money and hatred. Was there opportunity? Yes. She was the only person with the victims. Was there a weapon? Probably the hatchet in the basement. But there was no blood, and for the 12 men in the jury box, the reasonable doubt was immense. How could a woman hack 2 bodies and walk away without a spot? The trial lasted 13 days. The jury deliberated for only 1 hour. When the verdict of not guilty was read, the courtroom erupted in applause. Lizzie collapsed into her chair and wept. She was a free woman. She inherited her father's fortune, about $300,000, a massive sum at the time. She bought a mansion in the wealthy part of town, the Hill, and named it Maple. She finally had the plumbing, the electricity, and the servant she always wanted. But if the court acquitted her, Fall River society convicted her. No one spoke to her. Her old friends crossed the street to avoid her. She became a pariah in her own city, living in gilded isolation in her mansion. Even her sister, Emma, who had supported her during the trial, eventually abandoned her. In 1905, after a mysterious argument that was never explained, Emma moved out of Maplecroft and never spoke to Lizzie again. What did Emma know? What did she discover years later that made her flee the sister she swore to protect? Lizzie Borden lived the rest of her life in Fall River, surrounded by her dogs and her pet squirrels, ignoring the whispers and the children who sang the macabre rhyme at her window. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. The rhyme was wrong. It was 19 and 11 blows, but the stigma was eternal. Lizzie died in 1927 of pneumonia. She took her secret to the grave. She was buried beside the parents she was accused of killing. So, if Lizzie didn't do it, who did? Alternative theories are weak. Bridget the maid. She had no motive. Uncle John Morse. He had a confirmed alibi. A fugitive? Madman? Would he have entered and exited unseen, in broad daylight, without stealing anything, and locked the door behind him? The most likely explanation, the one that has haunted criminologists for 130 years, is that Lizzie really did it. Maybe she committed the murders naked, or wearing her father's clothes over hers. Or maybe, as some modern experts suggest, the blood spattered away from her, not onto her. Maybe she washed the hatchet in the basement tank. Maybe Bridget helped cover it up. The Lizzie Borden case is the supreme example of how the justice system can fail in the face of the unimaginable. Victorian society simply could not believe that a nice girl was capable of such evil. They looked at the clean dress and saw innocence. They should have looked at the cold eyes and seen the intelligence of a killer who knew exactly how to play the game. The house at number 92 is still there, on 2nd Street. Today it is a bed and breakfast and museum. You can sleep in the room where Abby was killed. You can sit on the sofa where Andrew died. And they say, on hot August nights, you can still hear the sound of footsteps upstairs, and a muffled laugh from a woman who got away with everything. Some stories were never meant for the light, but they are the stories that must be told. They are the files that must be opened. This has been a file from America's Dark Dossier. If you believe that the past is never truly dead, subscribe. and help us open the next file.